Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I have to admit, I think we have a first today, and we're in program 840 something or other. I've had financial experts on before, but I don't think I have ever had someone who is representing a credit union. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that, but we're going to learn so much more about my guest. And so please join me in welcoming Tansley Stearns to our program today. Welcome, Tansley. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing, Deb. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Perfect. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this.
I'm going to bury my head while you say all these things.
I know. It's always entertaining when we hear our own bios. We're always like, wow.
Yes. Yes. My mom would be very happy about it.
I know. Yeah. But you've earned all of these accolades.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So Tansley Stearns' experience has been shaped by her more than 24 years. You started when you were 2, 24 years of credit union leadership experience, including roles in research, sales, service, and government relations. This past summer, she joined Metro Detroit-based $1.5 billion community financial credit union as president and CEO. Alongside CFCU's approximately 350 team members, Tansley works tirelessly to create joy and ignite Michiganders' impossible dreams. The credit union serves more than 85,000 members, has 13 branch locations, and is designated a 2022 top 20 workplace by the Detroit Free Press. Tansley hosts a podcast titled Despite Impossible, which focuses on stories of individuals who have defied odds and don't comprehend the word impossible. From business to art, affordable housing, education, and more, Despite Impossible tells the stories of dreamers across the nation who bring the impossible to life. So again, Tansley, welcome. This is such an honor.
Thank you. It's such a treat to be with you today.
Well, we're going to have so much fun, and I mean, you've had a pretty diverse background. Mm-hmm. Like I said, started when you were 2. So what I always like knowing is how my guests got to where they are today. So tell us how you discovered that this is your passion in life.
Absolutely. So I grew up in the great state of Michigan, and one of the wonderful things about living in Michigan is that our maps are attached to our bodies. So
right.
This is where I grew
Colorado.
Up. That's right. So I grew up in a tiny town called Hillsdale, Michigan. Okay. And I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I graduated from there with 2 degrees, one in English and one in psychology. Okay. And my father was terribly concerned that I was going to waste my life away. And as I was looking for jobs, I was looking for roles in both marketing and social work because at 21, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I got an interview at a credit union, a small shop that served Macy's employees. So they were actually headquartered in the basement of a Macy's store in Waterford, Michigan. My mom went with me to that interview. And as we pulled into the parking lot, she got really concerned and looked at me very sternly and said, "Tansley, honey, is this a real job?" And really, that was a springboard for me into my future. I fell in love really quickly with the cooperative nature of credit unions. I believe that it is the best business model for human beings to reach their dreams. And the gift of my time there, I was there for 9 years, was I worked for a man named John Normando. He was a wonderful president and CEO, and he was a dreamer. And he really understood something that I believe is difficult in leadership, which is surrounding yourself by people that have complementary gifts. He was a CPA, a CFO by trade, and I was a marketer and a dreamer. And together we really were able to do some things that alone we might not have been able to do. And he also gave me a lot of exposure across the organization. And I, at that time, really started to form this dream of becoming a president and CEO. I also knew that it's unusual to start in the marketing seat and find your way into that CEO.
Because you're not a financial person.
That's right. I'm not a CPA. My dad is. And so I really formed my path as I went to a mid-sized credit union in Connecticut. I went on to work at Bethpage Federal Credit Union, one of the largest credit unions in our country, at our industry's think tank called the Flame Research Institute, and most recently at Canvas, wearing a lot of different hats, gaining exposure so that when the time was right to be able to talk to a board about this dream, that they could see that I had really worked hard to be able to understand the entirety of our business and how you can bring that to life. And so here I am. I got a call from a recruiter last year, and she knew me pretty well and said, hey, I know Michigan's your home state. I know this is your dream. You want to come meet these people and see what you think? And here I am.
Wonderful. I love it. I love it. And like we said, it is fairly unusual for women to have a high level position in any type of financial industry. And so bless you for doing this, because it does show that we can be whatever we want to be.
Yes. It's interesting. Credit unions have really unique data around the topic you're mentioning. We, as an industry, have more women in that CEO seat. And as the asset size gets larger, there are fewer women represented. And so we still have work to do. And I also really agree with you. One of my goals in life, as I have a 12-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, is that I know that in order to have more women in these seats, women have to see other women in those seats. And so my hope is that, to your point, whatever Mackenzie dreams of doing, she will see that when you have that dream and you chase that dream, it's possible to reach it, and that will invite her to consider more options in her future.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, let's do just a little basic question here before we do a lot more. I think a lot of people don't know what a credit union is. And we actually love credit unions. We moved from Colorado to Atlanta over 11 years ago, and we are still with the same credit union that we were with in Colorado. It's a fairly small one, pretty much just in Colorado, but we liked it because of the benefits and the fact that it was smaller. And clearly we haven't had any issues, being 1,000 miles away. But, I think people don't quite understand what a credit union is. They think, well, you have to be a member of an organization. So like IBM Credit Union, you have to work for IBM. But, there are so many credit unions like yours where you're not a member of a company or a group of people, like a military thing or something like that. So tell us a little bit more about what a credit union is.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate the question, because I do think that credit unions have an opportunity to tell our story more vibrantly. And I always love when I receive that question. We were really founded as an industry in the United States during the Great Depression. And in fact, there's a wonderful place that if your listeners are ever in New Hampshire, they should go, which is America's Credit Union Museum. And it's actually in the home of the place where the first credit union came to life in our country. And that man was an attorney, and every day he would cross the river and practice law. And he came home in the evening and opened the doors of his home. And there are these magnificent stories of his children watching people lined about the door because they didn't have a place where they could feel safe putting their hard-earned dollars to save. And they didn't have a place that they could trust to borrow money. And so they came together to do that. So we're a financial cooperative, very simply. We're not for profit. And so what that means is that our business model allows us to not chase quarter to quarter shareholder commitments. We have members. Every one of our members is a shareholder. And so our commitment is to them, and everything that we earn goes back to them in the form of better rates, better technology, and a commitment to service. So it's a really special business model. I love to talk about our board here at Community Financial. They are a volunteer board. So they raise their hands to do that without anything coming back except the good feeling that they are helping others. And that's a really special part of our industry. what you mentioned in terms of, can I join?
Mhm.
That really comes from our roots. I mentioned my first credit union where I started. They originally served Macy's employees. So at that time, you did have to work for Macy's to become a part of that organization. For us at Community Financial, we serve everyone across the great state of Michigan. So if you live, work, worship here in the Mitten State, we welcome you to come and be a part of what we are doing. And so it's a really special industry. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the collaborative spirit of credit unions. So unlike most industries where competitors would never call one another, if I had a real burning question today, I might call one of my fellow credit union CEOs down the street and say, hey, how are you doing this thing? And they would take my call and answer it, and we would do the same. And we think that that's one of the real gifts of our industry.
Right. And one of the things that I like is that now, we're part of Belco. Belco is a pretty good sized credit union, but you still feel like it's putting this in my air quotes for people who are just listening, a small town bank.
Right.
We get when we've done loans and things, we get a much better rate when we go through them. It is a little bit more complicated that we're 1,000 miles away, but there's these things called Federal Express. And, because there have been times where, you have to, and we haven't done anything for a while. So e-signatures might really have accomplished this, but there were times where we'd have to sign things and then, send them right back. When we moved here and got our mortgage, it was something that, again, a little bit more challenging, but you also knew that you were not just one of a billion people, and so that was always what was so good about it. They might not know me by name, but that was because I didn't go in. Now, if I'd gone in fairly often, they very well might have known me, but it still has that very much small town, small bank flavor. And I think that's one of the things that I hear people say, because, it's really funny. Anytime I would go to a networking thing here in Atlanta, and the bank people from whatever bank would come up and they'd say, oh, you've recently moved here. Have you moved your bank? And it didn't matter what they were. But if I said, oh, I stayed with our credit union, they went, okay. That was where the conversation ended, because they knew that they literally could not compete.
Yes. And, I'm really excited to say that some of the challenges that you have faced over time are things that I know credit unions are solving across the country, and we're taking really seriously. Ease of use is a foundational piece of what we need to bring to bear, and making it easier for our members. Because there are lots of human beings, my daughter included, that are unlikely to come into a branch location.
Yeah, they're going to use their phone to do everything they do. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So we're excited to make that commitment. And, what you speak about is something that we really take seriously as a strategy. We talk about engagement and experience for our members. If a member is going to come into a location, it's unlikely because they want to do a simple transaction. Usually they're using this mobile device attached to their hip, or they might be using an ATM. If they're coming in, it's likely that it's a bigger transaction.
Right. They're getting a car loan, their mortgage, whatever.
And so we're excited to bring those new experiences to life. In fact, we are launching within the next couple of weeks our playground location, which is a new branch experience where we're going to test new technology and the way that engagement comes to life with our members. And we're calling it the playground because we really do want to test and try some things. The world is moving so quickly right now that it's a good idea to be able to put something into action, even if it isn't perfect, and be able to improve upon it and learn from it and improve upon it. And that iteration is so critical as we continue to evolve our experience for our members.
Right. And one of the things that I've always been so impressed with credit unions, as opposed to the big guys, is how involved you are in the communities. And I know that is something that is just absolutely critical to you. So talk about a lot of the things that you have done over the years to really make sure that you are part of that community.
Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I came here, honestly, is that we have over 50 student-run branch locations, both in southeastern Michigan and in our northern region. And I just love this commitment from our hearts to students around financial literacy. And we're now,
Now, is this high school? Is this college? Is this?
it's high school, it's middle school, it's elementary school.
Ah.
And what we love is those are all instrumental stages. You know,
Right.
what's interesting about financial literacy is we geek out about it in credit unions and we love it. And unfortunately, the statistics about it are pretty lousy because
Right. I know.
most people don't want to come and just take a class, right?
They have no idea
Right.
how to do anything, and you're like, well, do you balance your checkbook? And they're like, bank, checkbook.
Right.
Yeah. Now, granted, I don't write a lot of checks anymore, but
Right.
yeah, they just, they're, and this has unfortunately been something for many years. Schools are not teaching the basics of financial literacy.
Right. And so what's great news is that we are partnering with the schools to bring that to life. I've had the chance since I got here in June to meet with the superintendents of all the districts that we are in. And they are so enthusiastic about our next evolution of this financial literacy, which will not only be that content, but technology and product line that are tied to those stages. You know, when you're in elementary school, it's just about, you know, how do we put away some of that money, maybe start to have some chores.
Right.
Learn about those buckets of save, spend, and give, and make that really simple and easy. As we get into middle school, maybe it's a first job, and what do we do with that? And then when we get to high school, maybe it's that first car. And what we know is that being with human beings across all those stages of life allows us to truly be a partner and ensure that that financial literacy is something that people activate, because knowledge doesn't always equate to behavior changes. And the way that you can maximize that knowledge equating to an even brighter financial future is ensuring that it's tied to something that's meaningful.
Right. You know, and it is one of those things, like I said, that people don't teach. And unfortunately, COVID, you know, just kind of threw everything in an uproar. People ended up using credit cards again when maybe they might have gotten away from them. But I think so many times, it was funny. I was talking with somebody the other day, and he said, you know, he went to college, and I don't remember actually where he went, but he said, you know, so freshman orientation, there were all of these tables set up around the room of all of the banks who were going to give you a credit card.
Right.
And of course, he said, we had no idea what that meant. You know? And that not only did we have to pay it back, but we paid it back with interest.
Right.
You know? And that was so true. I mean, I remember that too. Mine was actually a gas credit card, which at some point I reached and I went, okay, Mom.
Right.
And because I kind of kept up with it, but because I was only kind of keeping up with it, the interest was really going to nail me, and it did. You know, and it's great. And we're thinking, well, hey, I'm off to college. I'm, you know, getting my first job, all these things, and we do need credit cards to establish credit. I think that's one of the things that sometimes people don't get, but they also don't understand. Okay, if you don't pay it off, here are the results.
Right. You know, one of the things that I love that we do in the schools is something called a reality fair. And it really walks you through some of those scenarios that you just mentioned. And it's really fun to hear students talking about, okay, well, this is the job I have. And okay, if I'm going to make this decision about buying this car, what sacrifices do I have to make? And starting to really see that. And so that kind of experiential learning is something that we really love to bring to life.
Right. You know, and the problem is, of course, that kids aren't being taught it by their parents who were never taught financial literacy. I mean, you know, it's just been this kind of snowball effect. And, you know, even when I was in school, way back, we did a little bit of financial, but certainly not, here's how you balance a checkbook. Here are those things. And you know, to me, that's a school's responsibility. You know, yes, we need to learn math. We need to learn English. We need to learn all of those things, but we also need to learn what to do when we go out into that world. You know, and unfortunately, you know, people can't depend on the parents teaching it to them. That's obviously the great first resource. You know, your parents should be teaching that, but sometimes they just, like we said, they just don't know. So it's up to schools to complement what what they're being taught at home. You know, and so I love that you guys are taking the lead with being able to do that.
Well, and it's really good news because the state of Michigan is creating some mandates about that financial literacy in the
Mhm.
schools. And so we're thrilled to partner on that.
Mhm.
And I also think, to your point about parents, I've been the part of focus groups with
Mhm.
parents talking about these topics. And
Mhm.
I think what you mentioned in terms of some of the fear, the intimidation, I think even shame
Mhm.
that
Right.
parents feel.
Oh my
Even
gosh, I got in debt.
yes.
I don't
Well,
want my kids to know that.
right. Or even, I didn't learn those things from my parent. How do I teach this?
Right.
Because I haven't had the modeling
Mhm.
about it. Or, gosh, I actually had a parent talk about, they were so exposed,
Mhm.
that the parent wanted them to see every check that they wrote, every bill that they paid,
Mhm.
everything about their mortgage. And that was so intense, they wanted the opposite. So,
Right. They're like, I'm never getting a mortgage. No, that was scary. Mhm.
yes. So those early experiences do have impact. And I think as credit unions, we're excited to be a partner with parents as they tell those stories, that the tools and technology that we can bring to life for them can help make those conversations easier, simpler,
Mhm.
and more impactful.
Right. And you mentioned the innovation. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is something where it is totally different.
Right.
I grew up where every bill you paid, you
Yeah.
wrote a check for, and you put it in the little envelope and you put a little stamp on it to away it went.
Yeah.
And and you hope that the mailman didn't drop it in the mud and all of those things. And now, of course, we do so much online. We
Right.
virtually every transaction anymore online. And and so you have to be able to keep up with that technology, and even just things like knowing, is this a secure transaction?
Sure. Mhm.
And things like that. So tell us a little bit more about some of the innovation, because I think that's very cool.
Well, I consider myself very lucky to have spent 6 years working at the Feline Research
Mhm.
Institute. And one of the hats that I wore there was helping credit unions develop an innovation competency
Right.
grounded in human-centered
Mhm.
design. And that's just fancy words for really using empathy to
Right.
better
Mhm.
understand the biggest problems human
Mhm.
beings have,
Mhm.
marrying that with subject matter expertise to
Right.
come up with novel
Mhm.
solutions.
Mhm.
And what I love about that approach is that word empathy, because innovation can be the chasing of bright, shiny objects,
Mhm.
and that can be very distracting, sometimes lead you to investing in things that might not solve the problems
Mhm.
of your constituents. And so being able to start with empathy really ensures that we
Mhm.
are serving our
Mhm.
members in that way that really is connected to how well we know them, just what you talked
Right.
about in terms of your relationship with
Mhm.
Velco. So I'm really proud of that approach. We're developing our own innovation lab here at CFCU,
Mhm.
and we are invested in the innovation lab at Feline to continue to test new
Mhm.
products and services collaboratively.
Right.
Because, what is fun about that approach is that we can take a look at a host of new solutions. One credit union might test it and learn something a little
Mhm.
different than what we do, and we
Right.
can all apply those learnings
Mhm.
together. So we're
Right.
really thrilled about that
Mhm.
partnership.
Yeah. And a big part of it is knowing who you're working with.
Without question.
And like my mother, bless her, she's 90.
Mm-hmm.
She will not do online bill pay. She will not do online banking.
Right.
Now it is set up so that if I need to, I can see and things like that. But yeah, she still writes her checks. She even when she goes to Walmart, I get a kick out of it. She and they have this service, so she can't do self-serve. She has to go through and have it. She will hand them a blank check,
Oh
and
God.
they have a machine that
Uh-huh.
you run it through and it does it for the exact amount, and then she hands the check back to her.
Okay.
And so what it's done is it's looked at the routing numbers and all of
Oh,
that, and I tell her, Mom, a debit card will do the same thing.
right.
And
Yeah.
she's like, nope, nope, nope. And so yeah, knowing who you're dealing with, and knowing, okay, well, this generation, they're not ever going to step foot in one of your facilities. This generation is kind of the mixed generation. Then there's the older demographic who still wants to write checks. They still want to have their person call them by name when they go in. And obviously I think that's much easier with a credit union.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is that COVID did make some shifts there. So I've told this story about my mom in the early days of COVID when we weren't even touching anything, called me, and
I know
she
you're like
bought
flinging stuff through the drive-through at them.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, she went into the drive-through and she looked at the tube and she looked at the pen and she said, I drove away because I couldn't touch any of those things. And so we had this conversation about remote deposit capture, taking a picture of the check and having that be processed. And we set that up for her. And, you know, I think it speaks to the fact that across generations, because of what we've gone through with COVID, the technology adoption is certainly vastly more readily accepted by that next generation, my daughter. And, you know, my mom today is using her credit union's mobile app vastly more than she probably would have without COVID. And so, you know, I think you're absolutely right. Understanding our members really well, adapting to their needs, and really knowing where they are in that journey. Because, you know, I think for my mom, one of the things that matters most about the adoption of that technology is having someone she trusts walk her through that. And that's a role that we can really play.
Yeah, you walk in and you hand them your phone.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, you know, and is that the best optimal way? Well, maybe.
Well, we all learn, right? We all learn. Yeah. And, you know, she's taught me some really important lessons about where there's a need for innovation. You know, she about a year ago had a really bad situation with identity theft, and it was just traumatic, you know, and she talked very openly about how it caused a lot of shame and it caused all kinds of headaches. And, you know, we've talked as a team about the fact that there is this really important need for our members to help them identify those scams as they happen, protect them from those scams. And, you know, so again, that empathy really can guide us to what do we need to solve? And then how do we solve that in a new and interesting way?
Right. You know, and obviously a lot of it is making sure that you have the security features and things like that. But, you know, it does come back to, you know, you are smaller, therefore you can, and, you know, we talked about what, 1.5 billion. I mean, you know, clearly you're, but, you know, because you are smaller, you can help people when they have an issue. You know, I know that if I had an issue and walked into, say, a Chase or a Wells Fargo or whatever, you know, you might get help, you might not. And that's not a knock against them, because clearly they fill their role, you know, but yeah, it's just, it is very different.
Yeah, we really do take pride in that connection with our members and how we can use that listening that we think of as a superpower to enable even stronger solutions.
Right. So in your bio, I mentioned that one of your big goals is to help Michiganders. Did I say that right?
You did. Absolutely.
Yes. Fulfill their impossible dreams. And we don't think about financial institutions doing that. We think about financial institutions saying, give me your money and I might give it back. Right. You know? But talk to us about the impossible dreams. Because of course now that song's in my head. But yeah, how is it that you work with people so that they can fulfill those impossible dreams?
Absolutely. So, you know, when I got here in June and I started talking about dreaming about the impossible, there was a lot of confusion and really important questions from the team about, you know, why are you saying impossible? Don't you know that means it can't happen? And what I've said is, you know, I do believe as a leader, one of my roles is to speak in hyperbole and to invite us as an organization to dream boldly. You know, if I'm steering us way over here, you know, in a year, we're going to be here. And in 5 years, for those that are listening, we're going to be a little further. And by the time I retire, hopefully we'll be to that impossible. And so we need to really stretch ourselves to think that boldly. It's also important for us to think about the impossible because as a credit union and really for all financial institutions in a very highly regulated environment, for all the right reasons to be good stewards of our members' money, we tend to think fairly conservatively.
Right. You should be, like you said, you are the stewards of their finances. So you have to be responsible.
Yes. And with that responsibility, there's also risk in not thinking boldly. You know, for example, when we talk about some of the technology you and I have discussed, if we don't advance that to a place where my daughter, who's been swiping in an iPad since she was 1, which makes me a very bad mom, doesn't
No.
see the technology that all of us are using in our service model, she's likely to not think of us as a viable partner in her financial future.
Right.
And it's so much more than technology. You know, when we think about the impossible for us, it's about the big issues that are facing Michiganders, housing affordability, as an example.
Right.
You know, if you are looking for a home in the great state of Michigan today, it's really, really challenging to find one that is affordable. And I think for many people, it's such a big issue. Where do you even begin? And for us, it's such a big issue. Let's start, you know,
We can't ignore it.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, as a lender of choice in Michigan, we believe we have a role to play in that. So, you know, we're looking at special purpose loans that can help address that. We're looking at different kinds of housing. We're standing up a foundation. We're building partnerships. And so, you know, it's never one answer, especially with something that big. And, you know, I just know that a year from now, we're going to have even more stories to tell. And certainly in 5 years, we're going to be able to have really made this impossible dream come true.
Right. You know, and I mentioned in your bio that your credit union is Detroit based, which, you know, unless you've been hiding under a rock, we all know Detroit has had some incredibly challenging situations that have been going on and have for quite a long time. I mean, you know, that just the fact that the auto industry is, you know, their primary source and has been for many years for so many people for their income. And unfortunately, those things have changed. So how have you seen things kind of shift? I know you just got there, but how have you seen that, you know, as situations change, credit unions and other financial organizations have to make those shifts also?
Yeah, so our headquarters is in Plymouth, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. And, you know, Detroit is such a special place. You know, it is where my dad grew up. It is a city that cares deeply about the human beings that are there. And what's great is that, to your point, in the short time that I've been here, I've had the opportunity to be on the ground talking with people that not only care about the city and the future of this special city that is Detroit, they are taking action and they're interested in partners that wish to do that. So, you know, one of the meetings that I was able to bring to life in my first few months here actually came from a super fun conversation I was having with our chief revenue and lending officer, Jill Johnson. And, you know, I was asking Jill a little bit about, you know, how do we—
another woman. Woohoo!
Yes, that's right. That's right. And she's an incredible woman, by the way. And so I was asking her, you know, who would be a dream partner? You know, if you could think of anybody from a lending perspective that you think we should be talking to, who would it be? And she said, well, the guys, Keith and Evan, that are on this HGTV show, Bargain Block. And I had never seen Bargain Block. And I said, okay, well, tell me more. And she said, well, you know, they buy homes in Detroit and they enhance those homes and they're really serious about it. And they're so much fun to watch. And so I said, okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to reach out. So I mean,
the least is going to happen is you're going to get told no or ignored.
That's right. And I, you know, I'm just a big believer. We always ask, right? We always try. So I reached out and a few weeks later, and, you know, so much was happening at that time, right? I'm starting a new job and learning all kinds of things. And I got a phone call from Keith, and he talked to me a little bit, and I didn't realize who he was. And I said, he said, you know what, Tansley, you left me a message. And I said, oh no, you know, thank you so much. I don't know who you are. And I hung up.
Oh no.
He called back and he left a message, and I didn't answer because, again, I thought it was a sales call.
Right. You're like, yeah, whatever, dude.
So I listened to the voicemail a couple hours later, and I'm just mortified.
Yes, you're like, oh my gosh,
here's my chance.
No.
I let it go. So I called him back, and luckily Keith was so kind, and he said, no problem. He said, you know, actually, you're about the kindest person to a salesperson I've ever heard. So now we have a really good story about how we met. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we went down and we talked to Keith and Evan, and they really were gracious to share their commitment to the city. And, our discussions led to a much bigger partnership about how we can address this issue of housing affordability, how we can be good financial partners to them and to the homeowners that they are working to help come into these homes. So it's really been a lot of fun. And, I can go on and on for days about the many.
Now I have to watch just to.
Yes, you do. Yes, for sure. And they're just such gracious human beings. And I believe that those kinds of partnerships and collaborations are the way that we solve these bigger issues, right? Not any one of us is going to solve housing affordability.
Right.
And when we come together, we have a real shot at it.
Right. And I think probably one of the biggest issues is the fact that people think that home ownership is just out of the realm of discussion for them. Because when you're thinking about it, you're thinking, okay, all these homes cost $500,000, all of these things. And they don't understand, okay, first of all, you don't have to buy a $500,000 house. There are certainly much more homes that are wonderful homes that are much more affordable. Some might need a little bit of work, some might not, and even new builds, they are, you see the signs, you see the big stuff, but so many companies obviously are figuring out, okay, there's a very limited market there. We need to have affordable housing for the masses because that's where, the most people are. And so are they building the 500,000 and plus up? Yeah, well, of course, but they're also building things that are, maybe it's a townhome, maybe it's a condo, all sorts of things are just, much, I love the concept of tiny homes. I can never do that, but I love that concept. But yeah, so they're figuring out that our millennials, bless their little hearts, that's what they want. They don't want the big houses with, the 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and all of those things. They just want something that's nice and affordable. And they don't want to go into massive debt to get them.
Well, and that's, it's interesting you raised the idea of tiny homes. We're really excited about those as a possible part of the solution to affordable housing, and Keith and Evan have been really gracious to share with me that there's a probably right size for the footprint of a tiny home. They gently said to me, we know you've spent a vacation weekend in a tiny home, but we've lived in a tiny home.
Yes. Yeah. And it needs to be a little bit bigger than tiny.
Viable. Yes. What's viable. And also just thinking again, that's another way, I think, to your point, there are individuals of all ages that think about, I want to have a home. I want to have a grounded place that I can have memories built with the people that I love. And I want to consider going on vacations, and I want to dream about other things that I might spend my resources on. And so being able to have lots of different options for human beings to build their dream. I think one of the things I'm most proud of when we talk about human beings and their impossible dreams is that my dream is not the same as your dream, is not the same as the next person's dream. And we want to understand that and walk with people towards their unique impossible.
Right. And it ultimately comes back to what we were saying, financial literacy, understanding, okay, maybe you want the $500,000 home, but is your mortgage going to be so much that you can't take vacations? And unfortunately, we've seen that a lot. I've seen that so many times where, it's like, yeah, I have this gorgeous house, but, our mortgage is eating us alive. And I want to be clear, it's not the fault of the lenders. They are a business. They are in business to make money. If you have a mortgage that is too big, well, you signed for that. Now, did you understand what was happening? And I think that is one of the big issues is people don't always understand when they're signing for the mortgage, what all that entails. And of course, COVID threw that completely out. That was just very confusing. And, I remember talking to one person and she said, well, yeah, we're not paying and they're fine with that. And I said, you do understand you still owe that, right? They didn't just say, okay, we're writing off those $500 a month payments. No, you still owe that at some point. And it might be higher interest rates. I mean, all sorts of things. And so, yeah, it back to financial literacy. People just absolutely have to understand what is going on. And, and whoever's teaching it to them has got to be doing a good job at teaching it to them.
Yeah. And again, I think the key to that is that it's relevant, right? At the moment that we have the opportunity to talk to somebody as they're considering home ownership, the ears are open then, right? The opportunity is then to be able to talk about, okay, so what are your dreams? What matters most to you? And how can we then apply that knowledge so that it helps them make the decision that is going to head them in the direction that is towards those dreams.
Right. And there's so many variables that I think so many people don't even think about is like, okay, well, this is great. This is fabulous, but I'm not sure about the school district here.
Oh, sure.
Or, okay, we're retired now. And so we need to, all of these various things. And that's, if you're dealing with, the person where you're just the number, they don't care, but when you're dealing with a much smaller organization, whether it's a specific mortgage lender or something like a credit union, they are going to care because they want to keep you long term. I remember years ago, we were in the housing market, and we were being pushed towards a much larger mortgage than we could afford. We could afford it right then, right? But it was going to be difficult. And I remember our realtor telling us, you understand, now this was a while ago, this is probably 15 years ago, at least, if not more. They said, they really only need to do this to have you pay for a couple of years. And then they've made their money back. They can foreclose. They don't care. And I was like, oh, well, that's just mean. And they said, again, they're in it for business, and it didn't matter to them that in 2 years, somebody might have to declare bankruptcy or get out and all of those things. And so we went down to our credit union and they said, okay, here's what you can really afford based on what you were doing, and they did. They asked those, are you going to have a family? Do you want to take trips? All of those things. And so they did tell us, you qualify for much less than you think you do in order to be practical. And that was such valuable information.
Well, I love what you're pointing to in terms of the engagement with our team. We are thinking boldly about the future of work here at Community Financial, and that means really engaging people in how they can have a role that allows them to go home at night and be really enthusiastic about it. If you were to meet our team members here at Community Financial, sharing financial literacy, being able to see members reach those goals and dreams, walking with our members towards those is so powerful in terms of the way that they bring their roles to life. And so it's a huge part of who we are. And I talk a lot about the fact that, the experience we can create for our team here at the credit union then directly translates to our members having an even more powerful experience. And so, I think for our team, one of the reasons they love to work here is that we do care so deeply. We do put humans first. And our commitment to the community is so great.
I love it. Well, speaking of the commitment to the community, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. Sure. Let's talk about your podcast.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I like podcasts. And so, and it's funny. I just went to PodFest. We had 1,500 people there who were talking about podcasts. I mean, it was just, my little head came away and went, and just, but so it's your podcast is called Despite Impossible, and it is through the credit union. Am I correct?
It is, absolutely. So,
which sounds very unique, which, it's not just something you've gone off and done.
No.
It is something that the credit union is doing. So I love that. So talk to us more about that.
Absolutely. So I'm a big believer in thought leadership, in a world that is very, very, very noisy. People have all kinds of messages coming at them. And so for us to just be shooting out more messages about, we have great rates, we care deeply about our members, those things matter. And what I really think works is engagement where we're telling stories, where we're inviting a two-way conversation with our members, with our community. And that's really what Despite Impossible is about. We want to invite people to think boldly about what some people would think could never happen. And I've been talking a lot with my team about our guests, and it's hard to even come up with the right word to describe these amazing human beings, because they are dreamers. They are thinking boldly about the future. They have really grand ideas. And a lot of people dream, and that's where things stop.
Right.
These human beings we're having the opportunity to talk with and learn from are not only dreaming, they are executing, they're bringing those dreams into reality. And that's such a bold and unusual kind of human. And so what I love about this storytelling is that it invites our members, it invites Michiganders, it invites people across the nation, I hope, to be able to think about their own impossible and learn with us. Every one of these conversations, I'm sure you experience this as well. I learned so much, and every time there's something I'm taking away. And I'm also really excited about some of the themes that we hear. We ask a lot about, how do you bring the impossible to life? And almost every one of our guests has talked about just take a step. All of us might get stymied as we think about a bold dream. And almost all of them have said, just try something, do something today to walk towards that dream. So it's been really fun to bring the podcast to life. And it's just one example of the thought leadership that our team will be taking out to Michiganders so that they can get to know us better and that we can continue those conversations.
So tell me a little bit about some of the guests you've had on.
Absolutely. Well, they've been so miraculous. One of my favorites, of course, was my mom, Liz Webb. And it was so much fun to have her on the podcast because I'll tell you, clearly I know her very, very well. We're super close. And I hadn't realized until we had that conversation on the podcast how fearless she is. And I've got some fears in life.
I love it.
And she just doesn't have that. She's so brave. We had one of my dear friends, Molly Bell, who is an executive at another credit union in Colorado called Ent. And she's also started an animal sanctuary. And so she shared her story about that. We recently haven't released this one yet, but we had a guest on named Vince Kadlubik, who is one of the co-founders of Meow Wolf, and is dreaming boldly about how dreams and reality can come together to create experience. So we've had wonderful guests. They have magnificent stories, and it's just so inspiring to hear about people that are so humble as they go on these very brave journeys.
I love it. And I'm assuming that it's on iTunes and all of the other wonderful podcast
Any place you
places.
find your favorite podcast, you can find Despite Impossible.
Cool. I love it. And you don't have to be a member of your credit union to be a guest?
No, not at all. We invite all listeners, and I'm thrilled if somebody thinks that they are a bold dreamer and an executor. We always love to hear from possible guests as well.
Cool. I love it. I love it. Well, we've mentioned the fact that you as the credit union are very philanthropic, especially in the realm of financial literacy. What other programs do you do?
Absolutely. Well, one of our more recent partnerships was with the city of Plymouth, as well as artist Tony Rocco. So the city of Plymouth recently brought to life an art walk. And so essentially, instead of murals throughout the city, they have pieces of art that are both from Tony as well as from some other artists. And when I arrived here in Plymouth in June, again, one of the early conversations we had was with the city about how we wanted to continue to invest in Plymouth. It's our hometown as a credit union. And they mentioned that they were excited to bring to life phase 2 of that art walk. So if you're in Plymouth, Michigan, you can see that 2 of Tony's pieces of art are on our building here. And then we'll be sharing 8 more pieces of art that will extend the art walk. And it's really special because, art, again, I think inspires people to think boldly, to think about their impossible. It also does something called placemaking. So if you're in Plymouth and you're walking about and you're enjoying a wonderful meal and you're with somebody you care about, you see one of these gorgeous paintings, your memory is going to stick so much more vividly. And so we're really thrilled about being able to help bring that to life. And we have one more little element of that partnership that we are excited to be launching shortly, which is he's going to be designing some debit cards for us. So
how fun.
Right. Yes. And we intend to have some of the proceeds from that go to local philanthropic organizations.
I love that. And the reason I like talking about that is so many businesses, and I don't care if you're a very small business in your spare bedroom or, something much, much larger. One of the best things that you can do is to be involved in the community.
Oh, yes.
And maybe you are very small. Okay. You go and you help at a soup kitchen. Or you work with his, long ago, I worked for ING, the big financial behemoth. And we had a huge philanthropic program. I mean, it was a very large budget because we were a very large organization. But the things that we liked doing the most were the things where our employees got involved. And one of our most popular things was we had people who went and they tutored 8th grade students in math.
Oh, love that.
And I mean, it was so phenomenal because some of these people then were friends with those kids for the rest of their lives.
Sure.
And of course they were all actuary and math people and all that. So that was why it was, they worked with them on math programs, but it was something that it was such a win-win situation because the students, obviously benefited, the school benefited, the employees benefited. I mean, they loved it. If we had ever said, hey, you weren't doing that anymore, we would have just had an uproar. Even if they didn't do it, they liked that other people could. But, let's be honest, it also made us look good in the community.
Sure.
And that is one of the things that people always need to keep in mind when they're thinking about, what can they do from a philanthropic standpoint is what makes sense from a business perspective. I mean, clearly what makes sense for you guys is the financial literacy, and things like that. But yeah, how can you as a business give back to your community in a way that is a great partnership?
Right. Well, and one of the things that we've talked a lot about here at Community Financial that gets to your advice for business owners, I think, is around how do you have that giving connected to your good work?
Right.
And how do you have it be focused? One of the things that we have done for years is we've given very broadly and
right.
How do we
anybody who asked got
right,
yeah
right, and how do we narrow that giving so that our commitments are really closely tied to our work and we have an even bigger story to tell? So I think from a strategy standpoint, as you think about giving as a business owner, that's a really important part of it.
Right. Yeah. And we were the same way at ING. We did, and especially if our employees wanted us to do something. I mean, that was very much, but it was one of those where, we were kind of here, there, and everywhere else. And we finally thought, no, okay, we're a financial services company. We do need to focus on what were the things that made sense from a business perspective. And, the nice thing is you can pretty much make anything almost fit those guidelines. But, really do think about it, folks. How can you give back? Even if it's just something simple. I was talking to somebody earlier today. I interview a lot of authors. So I have all of these business books. I read them once and then they sit on the shelf. What could I do with those? Could they go to, it's probably not going to make sense for them to go to a nonprofit, but maybe the business school, or a local high school that has a business program. I don't know. Do they still do FBLA? I used to be in FBLA. And so, could we give that? And so it's great because it makes me feel good because I cleared out the shelves, but it also is hopefully helping someone else learn from these books because they're absolutely fabulous resources from my guests.
I love that.
Well, oh my gosh, we've only got about 5 minutes left. And so please tell us a little bit more specifically about the credit union. Like, okay, I'm in Atlanta. Could I join? All of these various things.
Right. Well, first of all, we do serve Michiganders only at this point. And I would always say that if you are interested in credit unions, if you look at credit union.
They're in every state.
They are. And so CUNA.org has really wonderful resources. They're the National Trade Association for Credit Unions. And they're wonderful local credit unions all over our magnificent country. From a community financial standpoint, we do serve our members fully. I think one of the things that's often not understood about credit unions is that we have the full suite of services. So from mortgages to savings accounts to investments, if it's a need under that financial umbrella, we take it very seriously, including commercial and business accounts. So we're really proud of that work as well. And we're just super excited to continue to invest in our communities, invite people to be a part of that conversation. And, we love the opportunity to invite people to dream those impossible dreams.
Right. And if you just want to see what they're doing, it's CFCU.org, because there are just great things. And it might give you inspiration for, hey, if I want to join a credit union in my area, they're doing it well here. Let's make sure that they're doing it well there.
Right.
And so it's great inspiration. It's not that you're comparing because everyone is different. But yeah, it's great. And it's funny because it does say, we're making our dreams come true. But you are living those messages. They're not just a message that is on your website because people will go, ooh, no, you're making impossible dreams come true.
We're really excited about that. And, I think the storytelling is going to be thrilling to watch. And so again, we appreciate the website mentioned, CFCU.org. Over time, keep an eye on what we're up to. I know that it will continue to grow and expand, and really excited to be able to share our story today.
Perfect. I love it. And I can't wait to know what comes next for you, because you're clearly, destined for great things. So we obviously have to keep in touch and have you on the program again.
Thank you.
Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
My invitation is really to dream boldly. Each and every one of us have those unique capabilities. We talk about belonging here at Community Financial, and we believe that happens when different people come together and they bring those differences to life, when they can fully be themselves. The impossible then does become possible. So keep dreaming boldly, find good collaborators, and really good things will happen.
I love it. Now, if they want to connect with you personally, how do they do that?
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Tansley Stearns. You'll find me there, and thrilled to connect with anyone that's listening. And of course, our website again, CFCU.org.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this has been such a fun conversation.
Yes.
And, can't wait to do it again. I'm Deb Greer. I've been talking with Tansley Stearn, the president and CEO. Pay attention to that, folks. The president and CEO of Community Financial Credit Union. I wanted to make sure I had it right. Until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Greer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.